All right, welcome back. Now, organization of a new government, page 123 where we left off. This will be part 2 of the read. As a result of the agreements and compromises reached in the Constitutional Convention, the delegates reached a new system of government. The chart on the next page shows the organization of the Constitution itself. So please make sure on page 124 that you read over the chart. The preamble or introduction to the Constitution began with the words, we the people. I don't know why I said we are. It's we the people. Emphasizing that the members of the Constitutional Convention were acting as the representatives of the American people as a whole. The preamble gave about 6 purposes of the new Constitution and the government it created. The purposes were to form a more perfect union, meaning to create a better representation of the whole, to allow us to become more of one instead of one of many. Provide for the common defense for our national security. To establish justice, to make sure that we end up doing right, such as your court system. Promote the general welfare, the well-being of its citizens, to make sure that everybody's got a good chance and a fair opportunity. Ensure domestic tranquility, peace, to make sure that we don't all go crazy. To secure the blessings of liberty, to make sure that nobody tries to take away our rights. Now the executive branch. The new national executive branch was the president. The president was made commander-in-chief of the nation's army and navy. The president was given the power to appoint ambassadors, negotiate treaties, and appoint Supreme Court justices. As chief executive, the president would also enforce the nation's laws. New laws by Congress also required the president's signature. The president was to be elected to a 4-term year. Because the delegates of the Constitution did not entirely trust the common people, they arranged for the president to be chosen by an indirect election. The voters could first choose the members of the Electoral College. Once elected, these electors would then vote to choose the president. Each state is free to choose its electors as it wishes. In the late 1700s, America was largely rural. Many people were farmers who knew little about politics. In the environment, a direct election of the president would become difficult. Legislative branch. The new national legislative was called Congress. Based on the Great Compromise, it consisted of 2 houses. Please make sure you note this. The House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress had the power to make laws, declare war, borrow and issue money, pay for military forces, and regulate commerce, which is trade, between different states and the foreign countries. And the judicial branch. Sorry. A new national judiciary was created consisting of the Supreme Court and any lower courts later created by the Congress. The Supreme Court could rule on cases involving either the new Constitution or laws passed by Congress. Its justices, which are judges, were to be appointed for life by the president with the approval of the Senate. Life tenure meant that the justices would not have to run for election and could be completely independent, meaning that if you've got a judge up there on that system, that he could stay there until he died. Now, please read over on page 125 the chart for the branches of the federal government so that you can understand that a little bit more. Page 126 is a good comparison of your Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution. I would strongly have you read over that, make sure that you understand that, so see that if you can put in the differences or even the similarities between the two. Now, the constitutional principles, which is limited government, republicanism, and popular sovereignty, as well as federalism. The basic challenge faced by the authors of the Constitution was to create a national government that would be strong, but not so strong that it might undermine the individual liberties identified in the Declaration of Independence. To achieve this goal, the new Constitution adopted a number of important principles. Limited government. One of the most important principles of the United States Constitution is the belief that the powers of the government should be limited. A self-governing people gives the government leaders only certain specific powers. They are the just powers of the government mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. Under our system of limited government, our national government has no duties or powers other than the powers specifically granted to in its Constitution. I cannot talk today, guys. I am so sorry. Republicanism. Authors created a republican form of government, a democratic government chosen by the people. A republic describes a government in which decisions are made by elected representatives, not handed down by a king. Popular sovereignty. Another key principle of the United States Constitution is that the people are sovereign. They hold supreme power. The just powers of the government came from the consent of the governed. The people exercise their sovereignty by elected representatives to Congress and by indirectly electing the president. Federalism. The authors of the United States Constitution create a federal republic. Government powers were divided between the national government and the states. To accomplish this, the writers of the United States Constitution created a system in which power was shared between the national, or federal, system and the state government. The federal government treats issues facing the entire nation, which state governments handle local affairs. Because power was divided between the state and national government, the authors of the Constitution believed that the national government would not become too strong. So they broke it into different types of powers. They pretty much evened out the powers. So the national government had the opportunity to really make plans and really make sure that they knew what they were doing. But the state government also had the applying power to make sure that local affairs were taken care of. Separation of powers. Now, separation of powers, the main thing that I would like for you to read over is just simply the chart that's in there on page 128. The separation of powers, the chart. Please make sure you go through and highlight that. Checks and balances, again, just the chart. You don't necessarily need to read all of the craziness that's in the paragraphs. Just look at those two charts on page 128 for the separation of powers and the checks and balances. Sorry, I'm hearing voices outside my window. The Constitution included provisions for change. The way the United States Constitution keeps pace is through the amendment process, which allows changes and additions to the text of the Constitution. To prevent changes, for an important reason, the amending process was made more difficult than passing an ordinary law. Although over 200 years old, our Constitution has thus kept up with the changing needs of our nation. A special elastic clause in the United States Constitution further provided Congress with the power to enact any law they deemed necessary to carry out its powers. These provisions have made our Constitution into a living document. The elastic clause has allowed the powers of Congress to increase dramatically since the early 1800s, due in large part to the decisions of the Supreme Court. (130) For a fact, you need to complete the chart below, the diagram below. Please, page 130, make sure that you get it done. Okay, I need to make sure that y'all understand the principles of the United States Constitution, such as your limited government, republicanism, popular sovereignty, federalism, separation of power, checks and balances, and the provisions for change, which is your amendment process. Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Opponents of the new Constitution were known as anti-feds. They included patriots such as Patrick Henry and George Mason. The Anti-Federalists found several major problems in the new Constitution. They argued that it would create a central government that would be too strong and might threaten individual liberties. Anti-Feds feared that future government leaders might build a strong army and use it to collect unpopular taxes. The Anti-Federalists also pointed out that there was no Bill of Rights in the new Constitution to protect individual liberties. Finally, after this long list of grievances, the anti-feds also felt that the Constitution gave too much power to the central government at the expense of the state governments. Now, not sure if you're aware of this, but anti-federalists are against strong government for a national government. Against. Like, they don't like it. They're anti. They don't like it. They do not like federal governments. The Federalist Papers. Those who favored the proposed Constitution were called Federalists. So anti-Federalists are against. And guess what? Federalists are, good job everybody, for it. They enjoyed the idea of a strong national government. They argued that a stronger government was needed to protect the nation from domestic unrest and foreign invasion. They also argued under the idea of the proposed plan that federalism and the separation of powers would prevent any one branch of national government from becoming too strong. Therefore, the individual liberties would be protected. Now, Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, along with James Madison, wrote the Federalist Papers. Make sure you underline that and understand what it is. The Federalist Papers was a series of 85 essays that sought to convince Americans that the new nation would not last if the proposed Constitution were not adapted, meaning that if it was not adapted, if it was not brought into play, we would not survive as a form of government. The Federalist Papers helped to persuade Americans, which means to persuade means to get them to join the side that they want, to approve the new Constitution. Thomas Jefferson called them the best explanation ever written about the principles of the government. Some even called the essays more significant public relation campaign in history. To obtain the necessary votes for ratification, supporters promised to add a Bill of Rights. With this assurance, by the end of 1788, 11 states had voted to ratify or approve the United States Constitution. 134 quick little write-out that you can do for Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. We'll also have an anchor chart activity that we can do together. Excuse me, soda's getting to me. That the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, so that we can have a better understanding of that and how everything plays into it. So that brings me to the end of chapter 8. It's getting dark outside, but I appreciate all of y'all being here with me so that we could read through this book and become a little bit better understanding of it. So until next time, I hope to see y'all. But before I get off, there is one last thing that I want to make a comment on. Now, a few of you have come to me on chapter 9 to see that if you could video yourself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is perfectly fine with me if you want to record yourself while you're doing the reading, just like I am. That's perfectly fine. I know, for example, 3 certain students ended up going over one of our past videos. If you want to be one of those people that contribute to the cause, so to speak, for these readings, please step forward. You don't have to read the whole chapter. If you just want to read like a little section of it for about 5-10 minutes, that's perfectly fine with me. Okay, I have no issue with it. I just need you to come forth and let me know and say, hey, Mr. Skinner, I want to do this. And more than likely, I'm going to be very happy about it, and I'm going to say, okay, you go do your thing. So if you are one of those people that might possibly want to do that, talk to me tomorrow, talk to me Tuesday, come forth. You could do it for chapter 9. You could do it for any of the other chapters for all I care. I don't care. Just if you want to, come and talk to me, and we'll set it up. All right? See y'all later.